I simply can't process that you've sold our ancestral home to your assistant for a single dollar, I stated, my gaze fixed on my husband as he carefully placed his golf bag into her brand new convertible. The brilliant morning light reflected off the car's metallic finish, a glare almost as sharp as the fury coiling in my gut. Julian didn't even grace me with a glance. The paperwork is filed. It's legally hers now, he scoffed, meticulously arranging his custom clubs in Chloe's trunk. She stood beside him, a portrait of smug youth, dangling the car keys from her perfectly polished nails. I took a slow sip of my Merlot, the full-bodied flavor a bitter counterpoint to the betrayal that coated my tongue. My hand had a slight tremor, but I kept my face a mask of weary defeat, carefully concealing the smile that was fighting to break free. Let him have his moment of triumph. Let him think I was shattered. He had conveniently forgotten about the prenuptial clause, detailing the complete forfeiture of assets in the case of infidelity. And more importantly, he had no idea that his lovely assistant was the niece of my divorce attorney's senior partner. "Isn't it a bit early for wine, Eleanor?" Chloe chimed in, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy. Her face, barely in its mid-20s, was a study in practiced naivete. When the man you've been married to for 16 years liquidates your home from right under you, no time is the wrong time for wine, I retorted, lifting my glass in a silent, sarcastic toast. The crystal, a wedding present from Julian's own mother, caught the sun. I remembered her tight-lipped smile on our wedding day and her warning that the Croft men were accustomed to getting exactly what they wanted. Before we continue, if you have ever been profoundly betrayed by someone you were supposed to trust, then this story will resonate with you. Go ahead and click subscribe. It's completely free, and you'll get more stories of justice being served right when they're released. Now let me walk you through how I meticulously turned my husband's unshakable arrogance into his most devastating undoing. Julian slammed the trunk closed, the percussive sound echoing across the perfectly manicured circular driveway of the Hawthorne estate, a property that had belonged to his family for nearly a century. I vividly recalled seeing it for the first time, feeling dwarfed by its imposing beauty, never once dreaming it would become both my sanctuary and my gilded prison. "We're off to the Hamptons for a few days," Julian announced, his eyes fixed on some point over my shoulder. "Don't bother us. The movers will be here on Monday to handle your things." I just nodded, taking another deliberate sip from my glass. "Have a wonderful trip." As their convertible sped down the long Sycamore Line drive and vanished from sight, I finally allowed my composure to crumble, sinking onto the cold stone of the front steps as a torrent of memories rushed in. I first met Julian Croft 17 years ago. It was at a charity gala for the Art Museum where I was working as a junior curator. He was the evening's main benefactor, having donated an enormous sum. When he found me at the post-dinner reception, I was immediately struck by his powerful confidence, the effortless way he navigated the room, a clear product of generational wealth and a lifetime of privilege. "You don't seem particularly impressed with all this," he had commented, offering me a flute of champagne. "Should I be?" I had fired back, taking the glass but holding his gaze. He'd let out a genuine, surprised laugh. Most people here are. I truly hadn't intended to fall for him. At 33, I had carved out a life for myself that was modest but deeply fulfilling. But Julian was relentless, charming, and possessed a directness that felt like a breath of fresh air after the men I'd dated before. Our whirlwind courtship ended with a proposal just 4 months later. "We will be partners in everything," he had vowed, sliding an enormous family diamond onto my finger. "Equals in all things." The wedding was a grand affair, held on the sprawling lawns of the estate. His mother had micromanaged every single detail, gently but firmly steering my own ideas until the final event was a reflection of her taste, not mine. I'd given in, thinking it was a small price to pay for harmony. I didn't understand that it was merely the first of 1,000 compromises. The changes that followed were so insidious, so gradual, that I hardly registered them at first. It started with Julian suggesting we merge our finances into a single account, just for simplicity's sake. A few months later, when he secured a major promotion, he insisted I quit my job at the museum. "You don't have to work anymore, darling," he'd said, framing it as a luxury, not the removal of my financial independence. By our 5th wedding anniversary, he was making every significant financial choice without so much as consulting me. By our 10th, I found myself in the humiliating position of having to ask for an allowance to cover anything beyond household groceries. The equal partnership he had promised had morphed into an unrecognizable dynamic, a beautiful cage whose bars grew tighter with each passing year. I pushed myself up from the steps and walked back into the silent house, the sound of my heels clicking on the marble of the grand foyer. I drifted into Julian's study and ran my fingers over the polished surface of the mahogany desk, the very spot where he'd introduced me to Chloe, his new personal assistant, just 9 months prior. The signs of the affair had been immediate and blatant. Julian started staying out later, his shirts carrying the faint, sweet scent of a perfume I didn't own. There were hushed phone calls he'd taken the other room. He became sloppy with his expense reports, receipts for romantic dinners for 2, at places he'd never taken me, charges for boutique hotels in the city, when he was supposedly working late at the office. Then there was the jewelry. I found a delicate gold necklace in his coat pocket, a gift that was clearly never meant for me. The business trips over weekends began to align perfectly with Chloe's own time off. 3 months ago, I began to document it all. I created a secret file tracking the late nights, the flimsy alibis that a single phone call could disprove, and the steady siphoning of funds from our joint accounts into places I couldn't trace. The breaking point arrived last Tuesday. Julian had left for the office in a rush, forgetting to lock his leather briefcase. I had never violated his privacy before, clinging to a respect for boundaries that he himself had long since abandoned. But a gut feeling, a primal intuition, compelled me to open it. Tucked beneath a stack of investment reports was a thick manila folder. Inside were draft divorce papers. My name, Eleanor Vance, was highlighted across dozens of pages, with handwritten notes in the margins about minimal settlement obligations and aggressive asset shielding. I remember standing there in his quiet study, the papers shaking in my hands as 16 years of my life came into sharp, brutal focus. I had never been his partner. I had been a beautiful acquisition, and now, my value having depreciated, I was being prepared for liquidation. That evening, I called Maya Chen. We had been roommates in art school, inseparable, but our friendship was another casualty of Julian's campaign of subtle isolation. "Ellie?" she answered, her voice filled with surprise. "Is everything all right?" "No," I confessed, my own voice cracking for the first time all day. "But it's going to be." We met at a coffee shop the next morning. Maya's usual sharp, professional air softened the moment she saw my face. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," she remarked, ordering me a double shot espresso instead of the latte I'd asked for. "I've been asleep for 16 years, I replied. "I'm just now waking up." As I laid out the whole sordid story, Maya's expression morphed from deep concern to steely resolve. When I got to the part about Chloe, she held up a hand, a curious expression on her face. "Chloe Foster," she said, clarifying. "Mid-20s, drives a new convertible, blonde, has a little star tattoo on her left wrist." My stomach plummeted. "You know her?" Maya's smile was slow, sharp, and full of strategy. "She's my law partner's niece. And I think, Ellie, we might have a very interesting opportunity on our hands." Now, as I walked through the cavernous, silent rooms of my home, I felt a strange blend of profound grief and exhilarating freedom. The Hawthorne estate had never felt like my own. It was always a monument to the Croft family legacy, not a home we had built together. I went to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and opened the door to the walk-in closet. Tucked away behind a row of Julian's custom-tailored suits was a wall safe he was certain I knew nothing about. I gently keyed in the combination. Our wedding date. His ego always made him so predictable. Inside, I retrieved the prenuptial agreement we had signed all those years ago. I flipped directly to the clause Maya had pointed out, my fingers tracing the words that were about to become Julian's complete ruin. In the event of proven infidelity by either party, all assets acquired prior to and during the marriage, including familial properties and inherited holdings, shall be forfeited in their entirety to the wronged party. I closed the safe, a genuine, triumphant smile finally gracing my lips. Sometimes the most powerful weapons are hidden in the fine print. I placed the prenup back in its hiding spot, my thoughts already spinning, calculating my next moves. That clause was the ammunition, but I knew I needed a flawless strategy to win this war. Julian was too wealthy, too well connected. I couldn't afford a single misstep. The next morning, I drove to a nondescript office building downtown where Maya had arranged a meeting with her senior partner, Jessica Reed. Unlike the glittering glass tower that housed Croft Capital Investments, this place was all business, functional and understated, much like Jessica herself. "This infidelity clause is highly unusual," Jessica stated, her pen tapping a steady rhythm against her copy of our prenup. Her office was compact but impeccably organized. Her degrees from Yale Law School hung discreetly on the wall, especially for an old money family like the Crofts. They usually armor plate their assets against everything. Julian thought it was a romantic gesture, I explained, the memory of his smug grin vivid in my mind. He said it proved how certain he was of our lifelong fidelity. In truth, I now realized he just enjoyed the grand theatrical gesture, absolutely certain he would never be the one to get caught. Jessica leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "But you have proof. Some. But I need more. Something undeniable." She nodded, her gaze already calculating. "Then we build an ironclad case, meticulously. We need dates, times, locations for every meeting, evidence of gifts, bank statements that show the flow of money. We create an airtight timeline. In the meantime, we need a complete picture of your financial standing." Those words landed like a physical blow. I don't know our complete financial situation." Jessica's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "That's not unusual, Ellie, but it is our first and most significant hurdle." Over the next hour, we compiled a daunting list of documents I had to locate. Tax returns going back a decade, investment statements, deeds to properties I barely knew we owned. The sheer scale of my ignorance was horrifying. I had completely abdicated control of my own life. "He's isolated you," Jessica observed quietly as I struggled to name even one of the brokerage firms we used. "Financially, socially, it's a classic pattern of coercive control." The question she asked next hung in the air like an accusation. "Who, besides Maya, do you have in your support system?" I mentally scrolled through a list of ghosts. My friends from the museum had faded away years ago. My cousin, who was once like my sister, was now just a name on a Christmas card list. My book club had fallen apart after Julian kept scheduling unavoidable conflicts on our meeting nights. "I didn't even see it happening," I whispered, a hot flush of shame creeping up my neck. He always had such plausible reasons. "The couple we used to travel with? He said the husband had made a pass at me. My close friend, Catherine? He claimed she was envious of our wealth and it was making her bitter." Jessica's gaze was steady and free of judgment. "Isolation is a primary tool of control, Ellie. But in this case, it works to our advantage. Julian assumes you're alone and powerless. He is underestimating you. That is his greatest vulnerability." I left Jessica's office with a new burner phone and a powerful, unfamiliar sense of purpose. The shame of my situation was still there, but it was crystallizing into something harder, something stronger. Resolve. For the next 2 weeks, I transformed into a forensic accountant in my own marriage. While Julian was at the office, I was a silent whirlwind, photographing financial statements, downloading tax returns, and making copies of every document I could find. I uncovered offshore accounts he'd never mentioned and property deeds in 4 different countries. The more I dug, the more I understood the staggering scope of Julian's deceit. We weren't just well off, we were stratospherically wealthy, far beyond what he had ever led me to believe. And he had been methodically moving millions into accounts that bore only his name for years. Tracking the affair itself was almost laughably easy. Julian had become arrogant in his certainty of my obliviousness. I took pictures of him and Chloe leaving boutique hotels in the afternoon. I documented her car parked in our driveway on days I was supposed to be at a new Pilates class he'd so generously signed me up for. I even managed to clone his phone one night after he'd had too much whiskey and passed out, granting me full access to their text history. "Can't stop thinking about you," Chloe had texted after one of their trysts. "Your wife has no idea what you're really capable of." "She doesn't challenge me the way you do," Julian had texted back. "Just a little more legal maneuvering and we'll be free." Reading their words made me feel physically sick, but I saved every screenshot, uploading it all to a secure server Jessica had set up. Each message was another brick in the wall I was building around him. The most difficult part was the performance. I had to continue playing the part of the devoted, slightly dull wife. I made Julian's favorite dinners, asked about his day, and pretended not to see the faint smear of lipstick on his shirt collar, or notice how he headed straight for the shower the moment he walked in the door. I smiled through his transparent excuses about late nights at the office when I had time-stamped photos of him and Chloe entering her downtown apartment. "You seem different lately," Julian commented one evening as I poured his favorite single malt scotch. "Quieter, more accepting." I handed him the glass, my fingertips brushing against his. "I'm just trying to be more appreciative of what we have," I said, the hidden meaning a small, private victory. The following Tuesday, I stopped at a little independent coffee shop, far from my usual neighborhood, needing a quiet space to go over my notes before meeting with Jessica. I was poring over a bank statement when I heard a familiar voice at the counter. "Venti skinny vanilla latte, extra shot, no foam." I glanced up and saw Chloe, her back to me, impatiently tapping her foot. I started to quickly pack my papers, hoping to leave unnoticed, but she turned and her eyes locked with mine. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, immediately followed by something I didn't expect. Not guilt, but cool calculation. She walked directly to my table. "Mrs. Croft," she said. "What a coincidence." "Chloe," I replied, my heart hammering against my ribs as I fought to keep my voice even. "I don't usually find myself in this part of town." "Me neither," she said, sliding into the chair opposite me without an invitation. "Only when I'm visiting family." I held her gaze, my expression neutral, though my mind was racing. "Family? My aunt lives just a few blocks from here. You might actually know her, Catherine Pierce." The name hit me like a physical shock. Catherine, my best friend from my museum days. The woman Julian had systematically poisoned me against, convincing me she was toxic and resentful. "Catherine is your aunt," I stated, the implications swirling in my head. Chloe's smile was unreadable. "It's a small world. She used to speak so highly of you back before you cut her out of your life." I sat there, paralyzed, as the puzzle pieces began to slam into place. This wasn't a random affair. Chloe targeting Julian, the sale of the house, it was all connected. "This is not what you think it is," Chloe said quietly, her eyes reading my face. "But we need to talk. Not here." She pushed a napkin across the table. An address was scrawled on it. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. Before I could even think of a response, she was gone, leaving me with a storm of new questions and the chilling certainty that the game I was playing was infinitely more complex and dangerous than I had ever imagined. I stared at the address scrawled on the napkin in Chloe's precise, elegant handwriting. It was for a small, quiet park on the outskirts of the city, public enough to feel safe, yet private enough for a conversation that couldn't be overheard. My mind was a whirlwind of possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. Was this some kind of trap? A prelude to a confession? Or just another layer of manipulation? Sleep was impossible that night. I lay in bed next to Julian, the man I had shared my life with for 16 years, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing and wondering how a person could become a complete and utter stranger. The morning brought no answers. I moved through the motions of my day like an automaton, my entire being focused on the 2 o'clock meeting. Julian left for an important client lunch, which I knew from his cloned phone was just another rendezvous with Chloe. "Don't wait up," he called out as he left, no longer bothering with even the thinnest of lies. At exactly 2 o'clock, I pulled into the park. Chloe was sitting on a bench overlooking a small duck pond. Dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, with her hair in a ponytail, she looked less like the polished, predatory assistant and more like a college student. "You came," she said, a note of genuine relief in her voice. "Explain," I demanded, choosing to remain standing. "Catherine is my mother's younger sister," she began, her eyes meeting mine without faltering. "When I was looking for a job after graduation, she told me about you, her best friend who had married into the Croft family and then just disappeared from her life." Chloe's gaze was unwavering. "She never understood what happened. So you intentionally got a job with my husband to, what? Investigate me." The sense of betrayal was sharp and new, another wound in an already tangled mess. Chloe shook her head firmly. "I applied to Croft Capital because they had the best-paying analyst program in the city. Getting assigned to Julian, that was just a coincidence. But once I figured out who he was, who you were..." She trailed off. I started to notice things. "Like the fact that he was sleeping with you," I said, unable to hide the acid in my voice. "Like the fact that he's been systematically embezzling funds from his clients' portfolios, including my own father's," Chloe countered, her voice hardening. "Like the fact that he's been moving assets offshore in preparation for divorcing you. Like the fact that he's been researching hitmen on the dark web." That last sentence stole the air from my lungs. "What?" Chloe took out her phone and showed me screenshots. They were from Julian's office computer, conversations she had carefully documented. The text was bone-chilling, inquiries about permanent solutions and untraceable accidents. "He doesn't just want to divorce you, Ellie. He wants you gone," she said, her voice low and urgent. "The divorce filing is his alibi. If something unfortunate happens to you, he can claim he was already planning a clean, legal separation." My knees felt weak, and I finally sank onto the bench next to her. But why? The prenup. He could just divorce me. "Because of the infidelity clause," Chloe explained, the pieces clicking together with terrifying speed. "Maya showed it to my Aunt Catherine, who showed it to me. If he divorces you and you can prove he cheated, he loses everything. But if you have an accident before any papers are filed, he inherits it all." "And you?" I finally asked, the question hanging between us. "What is your part in all of this? The affair, the house?" Chloe's expression was grim. "To protect you, and to collect the evidence to put him away. Everything I've done has been documented and shared with Jessica Reed. Every conversation, every financial document he had me prepare. The house transfer was his idea. He's so blinded by his ego, he thinks I'm completely infatuated with him, ready to be his partner in crime. I struggled to absorb it all. How can I be sure I can trust you?" "You can't," she admitted honestly. "But right now, I'm the best shot you have at stopping him before he does something we can't undo." She handed me a small flash drive. "This is everything? Financial records, his communications, proof of the affair, and his research into arranging your accident." Jessica has a copy of it all. I turned the tiny piece of plastic over in my palm. This small object held the truth of my husband's character. "Why?" I asked again. "Why are you doing all this?" "For my Aunt Catherine, who never stopped missing her best friend. For my father, whose retirement fund Julian plundered. And maybe," she confessed, her voice softening, because I can't stand to see another woman be used and discarded by a man who thinks his money makes him invincible. Over the next hour, Chloe laid out a daring, intricate plan. It would leverage Julian's own arrogance against him. We would allow him to believe his scheme was progressing perfectly. Chloe would continue to play the role of the devoted mistress, all while feeding us information. I would play the part of the heartbroken, oblivious wife, completely unaware of the mortal danger I was in. The timing is everything, Chloe stressed. We have to let him feel like he's already won before we make our move. As we worked through the details, my thoughts drifted back to our wedding day, to the moment we signed the prenuptial agreement. I had been the one to insist on the infidelity clause, not from a place of insecurity, but as a testament to what I believed our marriage would be. If we're truly going to be equal partners, I had told Julian in his lawyer's stuffy office, then faithfulness isn't an obligation, it's the foundation. Julian had laughed, finding my earnestness quaint and romantic. Put it in, he'd instructed his lawyer with a grand wave of his hand, though of course, neither of us will ever have need for it. The smug certainty on his face that day was the same expression he now wore when he spoke of our separation, utterly convinced of his own brilliance, completely blind to his impending fall. When I returned home from the park, I found Julian in his study, a glass of scotch in his hand despite the early afternoon hour. "Where have you been?" he asked, his tone attempting casualness, but his eyes were sharp, probing. "Just thinking," I answered honestly, "about what comes next." An expression that looked almost like pity flickered across his face. "You should start packing, Ellie. The estate transfer is a done deal. Chloe's name is on the deed." I let my posture slump, forcing tears to well in my eyes. Why her, Julian? What did I do wrong? He put his glass down, clearly pleased by my display of distress. "It wasn't any one thing. You're just comfortable. Predictable." Chloe challenges me. She understands the world I live in. I nodded, letting a single tear trace a path down my cheek, all the while mentally recording his every word. "I see. Don't worry," he said, his tone oozing false magnanimity. "I'll make sure you're taken care of. A small condo somewhere. Nothing grand, but you'll be comfortable enough." The casual cruelty, the complete erasure of our 16 years together, it didn't break me. It forged my resolve into something unbreakable. The days that followed were a master class in performance art. I had to appear utterly broken while secretly communicating with Jessica and Chloe, meticulously documenting Julian's every action, all while maintaining a facade of total ignorance. The nights were the worst, lying next to a man who was actively plotting my demise, feigning sleep while every nerve in my body was on high alert. By day, I watched him dismantle our life together. He sold off pieces of art that I had personally acquired for our collection and closed joint accounts, all while his contempt for me grew more and more palpable, secure in his belief that I was a powerless victim. "You're hardly eating," he noted one evening, a predatory glint in his eye. "You really should take better care of yourself, Ellie. Your health is so important." The veiled threat was not lost on me. I managed a weak smile and took a bite of the dinner I had cooked, wondering if he had already started trying to poison me. From that day on, I prepared our meals in separate pans, discreetly switching our plates when he wasn't looking. The constant vigilance was exhausting, but beneath the fear, a steely determination was growing, a strength I never knew I had. Julian had underestimated me for 16 years. He was about to learn just how costly that mistake would be. 3 weeks after I learned of Julian's murderous plan, I stood in our kitchen, reviewing the last set of documents Chloe had secretly sent over. The property transfer was, on paper, complete. The Hawthorne estate, my home, now legally belonged to Chloe Foster, all for the token sum of $1. The sheer audacity of it would have been laughable if the reality weren't so grim. "The transfer is on the books," Jessica had confirmed in our last call. But it's the final piece of evidence we needed. No court in the country will uphold a transaction so transparently fraudulent, not when combined with the infidelity, the prenup, and the conspiracy. Letting the transfer go through had been the most difficult part of the plan. My every instinct had screamed at me to fight it, but I trusted Jessica's strategy. We had to give him enough rope. "He's throwing a dinner party tomorrow night," I'd told Jessica, "for board members, business partners. And he's invited Chloe." Jessica had raised an eyebrow. "That's brazen." "He's parading her," I replied, making a statement without saying a word. "But I think it's our chance." That chance was now just hours away. I moved through the formal dining room, setting the table with the precision Julian's mother had drilled into me. Each piece of silver, each crystal goblet was placed according to a rigid century-old tradition. "The flowers are too garish," Julian commented, striding into the room and surveying my centerpiece with a sneer. "This isn't a party, Eleanor." I silently removed the brightest roses from the arrangement. Inside, I seethed. Of course it wasn't a party for me. It was supposed to be a public execution of our marriage. What Julian didn't know was that I had added a guest of my own to his list. With his unwitting permission, I invited Maya Chen, he'd mentioned offhandedly. "I know you two were close once. Figured you could use a friend for moral support." The calculated cruelty was stunning, but Maya's presence was exactly what our plan required, a credible legal witness to the night's events. As our guests began to arrive, I played the part of the gracious, if subdued, hostess to perfection. I smiled, I poured drinks, I made small talk, all while Julian held court, the master of his domain. Chloe made her entrance fashionably late, her crimson dress a stark, deliberate contrast to my own conservative navy blue. "Chloe," Julian boomed, greeting her with a warmth that was far too familiar for an employer. His hand rested for a moment too long on the small of her back. "So glad you could make it." I saw Maya, standing beside me, take a sharp, quiet breath. Her eyes flickered from Julian to Chloe, and then to me. I gave her the slightest shake of my head. "Not yet." Dinner was an excruciatingly slow affair. I served each course, refilled wine glasses, and maintained a mask of polite composure as Julian's behavior toward Chloe grew increasingly audacious. "I'm thinking of taking a sabbatical," he announced as dessert was served, his hand now brazenly covering Chloe's on the table. "A few months, maybe. See Europe." "How wonderful," commented Caroline Dutton, the wife of Julian's oldest business partner. "Are you going with him, Eleanor?" Before I could even formulate a response, Julian let out a short, sharp laugh. "Oh, I imagine Eleanor will be far too busy, settling into her new life." An awkward silence descended upon the table. "New life?" prompted James Dutton, his brow furrowed with concern. Julian made a sweeping gesture with his wine glass. "Change is a part of life, isn't it? Sometimes old things have to end to make way for the new." His eyes landed on Chloe, who offered him a look of pure, feigned adoration. "Julian has been such an incredible mentor," she interjected sweetly. "He's been teaching me so much about managing major assets, like this very estate." "Chloe has a real gift for acquisition," Julian added, his smile turning venomous as his gaze fell on me. I let my dessert fork slip from my fingers, the sharp clatter against the porcelain silencing the room. "Oh, forgive me," I murmured, bending to pick it up. So clumsy of me. Under the table, Maya's hand found mine and gave it a firm squeeze, a gesture of both support and warning. Let him keep talking. In fact, Julian plowed on, drunk on his own power. "Chloe has already taken ownership of this property. A brilliant negotiator. Our Chloe." A series of audible gasps went around the table. "You sold the Hawthorne estate?" James asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "Transferred ownership," Julian corrected, clearly relishing the shock. "Time for new blood, a new vision. Chloe has impeccable taste." "And what about Eleanor?" Maya asked, her tone perfectly pitched to sound like simple, friendly concern. Julian waved his hand dismissively. "She'll be taken care of." modestly. Chloe leaned in, her expression a mask of earnestness. I actually suggested we document the whole arrangement just for full transparency, she turned to Julian. In fact, I brought the forms I mentioned. We could even sign them right now, with everyone here as witnesses. It was a stroke of genius. Chloe was baiting him into creating more evidence of his own fraud, right in front of a room full of powerful witnesses, all while making herself look like the responsible one. Julian, too blinded by wine and his own ego to see the trap, beamed at her. An excellent idea. I adore your thoroughness. While Chloe fetched the documents from her purse, I excused myself to the kitchen. I needed a moment. The very walls of my home, the home I was about to reclaim, seemed to be humming with the night's tension. In the preceding weeks, I had been quietly preparing for this moment. Day by day, while Julian was at his office, I had packed away small, meaningful possessions: my grandmother's handwritten cookbook, old photo albums, my own jewelry, and moved them to a secure storage unit. I had secretly reconnected with Catherine and other friends Julian had forced out of my life, rebuilding the support system he had spent years tearing down. I had also started transferring utilities and other accounts back into my name, small acts of administrative rebellion that would smooth my transition to independence. When I returned to the dining room with a tray of coffee, I found Julian signing Chloe's documents with a dramatic flourish of his pen. His oversized signature was just another piece of evidence against him. "Witnessed and documented," he declared, looking around at the sea of uncomfortable faces. His eyes finally met mine, searching for the devastation he so desperately wanted to see. I simply gave him a serene smile and poured his coffee, just the way he liked it. 3 days later, Julian was packing his bags for a supposed business conference that was, in reality, his new life with Chloe. I stood on the driveway watching him load his precious golf clubs into her convertible. It was the exact same scene that had started this whole ordeal, but now I saw it with perfect clarity. "Well, I suppose this is it," he said, not even trying to hide his smug satisfaction. "The movers will be by for the rest of my things next week." "You're really just leaving," I said, my voice carefully modulated to sound shaky. "After 16 years. He glanced at his Rolex, impatient. "It's been over for a long time, Ellie. You know that." "I guess I just didn't want to believe it," I replied, the partial truth tasting like ash in my mouth. A triumphant smile spread across his face. He had won. "That was always your problem," he said, his final words to me a monument to his own arrogance. "You never saw what was right in front of you." As he slid into the passenger seat and Chloe sped away, his expression was one of pure, unadulterated confidence. He was a man who believed he had just committed the perfect crime. I took a sip of my wine, a real smile finally touching my lips. He was right about one thing. For years, I hadn't seen what was right in front of me. But now, I saw everything. I gave myself exactly 48 hours to savor the profound silence of the empty house before I set the final phase of our plan into motion. The estate already felt lighter, as if Julian's very presence had been a physical weight I'd grown so used to. I'd forgotten it was even there. On the morning of the third day, I made a call to Jessica Reed. It's time. The events that followed unfolded with the swift, merciless efficiency of a legal blitzkrieg. By midday, the petitions were filed. By 3 o'clock, Julian was being served with legal papers at the 5-star resort where he and Chloe were celebrating their new life. Their romantic getaway was brought to an abrupt halt by a court officer with a grim expression and an impeccable sense of timing. I wasn't there to see it, but Chloe recounted the scene to me later in glorious detail. Julian lounging by the infinity pool, a cocktail in his hand. The officer's polite but firm approach. The look of utter confusion on Julian's face as he took the thick envelope. The dawning, sickening horror as he tore it open and read the contents. Divorce papers citing infidelity, accompanied by a thick binder of evidence, photographs, text message logs, and signed witness statements, all culminating in a petition to enforce the infidelity clause of our prenuptial agreement. His first call, predictably, was not to his lawyer. It was to me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He spat into the phone, his voice a low growl of barely contained fury. "I'm reading the fine print," I replied, my voice perfectly calm. "Something you should have done more carefully. This is insane. You have no proof." "Page 17 of the petition," I said, interrupting him. "You'll find a rather lovely photo of you and Chloe entering the St. Regis on March 14th, the same day you told me you were at a conference in Boston." A moment of stunned silence on his end. Those photos could be fake. Anyone can manipulate an image. "The metadata is pristine," I continued smoothly, "time-stamped and geotagged, and your watch is clearly visible in 3 of the shots. The Patek Philippe I bought you for our 10th anniversary. It's quite distinctive." Another silence, longer this time. "You're bluffing." "Page 24, I went on as if he hadn't spoken. "The text messages. My personal favorite is the one from April 9th, where you describe in rather graphic detail what you plan to do with Chloe once you're finally free of the dead weight." I could practically hear the gears in his head grinding to a halt. "You hacked my phone. That's a crime." "No more of a crime than plotting your wife's murder," I countered softly. The sharp, panicked intake of breath on the other end of the line was my victory. "What are you talking about?" "Page 38, I said. "Screenshots of your communications on the dark web, the crypto transfers to untraceable wallets, the inquiries about permanent solutions, and accidents that can't be traced." His voice dropped to a choked whisper. "You can't prove any of that was me. The FBI seems to think they can. They're taking a particular interest in the wire fraud aspect. Something about moving illicit funds across state lines is apparently a federal offense." The line went dead silent for a full 10 seconds. Then a spark of his old arrogance returned. "None of it matters. The estate is out of my name. It's not my asset anymore. And Chloe is my star witness," I finished for him. "Did you honestly believe, after you embezzled her father's retirement savings, that she would choose you over her own family? You've been played, Julian. From the very beginning." The preliminary hearing was fast-tracked due to the evidence of a potential physical threat. I sat across the courtroom from Julian, whose face was a thunderous mask of rage. He had a phalanx of 5 expensive lawyers surrounding him. I had Jessica, Maya, and Chloe sitting calmly beside me. Quality over quantity. The judge, a formidable woman in her 60s who radiated an aura of no-nonsense authority, reviewed the filings. When she arrived at the section detailing the $1 property transfer, she looked up over her glasses, her gaze like ice. "Mr. Croft, you're telling me you transferred a family property valued at $15 million to Ms. Foster for the sum of $1? Julian's lead counsel stood. "Your Honor, it was a legitimate gift between an employer and his secretary," the judge finished for him, her voice dry, "with whom he was having an affair while simultaneously planning to divorce his wife of 16 years. Is that correct?" "The transfer was legally executed, Your Honor," the lawyer insisted. "All the proper forms were filed." "Actually," Chloe spoke up, her voice ringing with clarity in the silent courtroom, "they weren't. The documents Mr. Croft signed at the dinner party were merely acknowledgments that he was directing me to create a fraudulent transfer of title for the express purpose of circumventing his prenuptial agreement." Julian's face went completely white as Chloe handed a document to the court clerk. "This is my sworn affidavit, Your Honor, detailing Mr. Croft's instructions to me, along with audio recordings of our conversations about his intentions." The judge read the document, her expression hardening into granite. "Miss Foster, you were acting as a confidential informant after discovering Mr. Croft's plan to harm his wife." "Yes, Your Honor." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Julian's lawyer frantically called for a recess. As they huddled together in a panicked circle, Julian's eyes locked with mine across the room. The hatred was there, But beneath it was something I had never seen in him before: pure, unadulterated fear. When the hearing resumed, the tone had shifted entirely. Julian's lawyers were no longer on the attack. They were in full damage control mode, talking about misunderstandings and offering a settlement that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. The judge was not impressed. The court finds there is more than sufficient evidence to freeze all of Mr. Croft's assets, pending a full criminal investigation into these extremely serious allegations. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just triumph. It was the feeling of taking the first step back into my own life. The divorce itself took months to finalize, but the outcome was a foregone conclusion. The infidelity clause was enforced, and Julian lost any claim to our shared fortune. The fraudulent property transfer was voided. The criminal case against him proceeded on a separate track, ensuring he would never be a threat to me or anyone else again. More profound than any financial victory was the reclamation of myself. I redecorated the estate, filling it with vibrant art and colors that I loved. I hosted parties for my old friends, the house filled with laughter for the first time in years. I reconnected with my cousin, who wept with relief when I called. I rebuilt my friendship with Catherine, piece by piece, healing a wound that Julian had callously inflicted. 6 months after that first day in court, I officially launched a foundation from the East Wing of the estate, a resource center offering financial and legal aid to women escaping controlling and abusive situations. The irony of using the Croft family home for such a purpose was not lost on me. It was poetic justice, transforming a symbol of oppressive control into a beacon of empowerment. On a warm summer evening, exactly 1 year after Julian had driven away with Chloe, she and I sat together on the front porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "He was sentenced today," Chloe said quietly, swirling the wine in her glass. 10 years for the financial crimes. The conspiracy charges were harder to prove, but this is a long time. I nodded, a sense of quiet finality settling over me. "It's enough. Do you ever regret it?" she asked after a moment. "Marrying him?" I considered her question. "No, I regret losing myself for so long, but I don't regret the experience. It taught me how strong I really am. I wouldn't be this version of myself without it." Chloe smiled and raised her glass. To fine print and fresh starts. I clinked my glass against hers. "And to always reading the entire contract before you sign." The setting sun cast long, peaceful shadows across the lawn, where I had once stood and watched my life seemingly fall apart. I took another sip of wine, savoring its complex notes. Life, I had learned, was like that. It had layers of bitterness and sweetness, but it was always worth experiencing in its entirety. The estate was no longer a gilded cage or a trophy. It was simply a home, my home, built on a foundation of hard-won wisdom. "So what's next?" Chloe asked, gesturing toward the sprawling grounds. I smiled, watching the first stars begin to prick the deep velvet of the sky. "Whatever I want. That's the real beauty of writing your own story. You get to decide the ending. If you found satisfaction in seeing Eleanor take back her power and forge a new path for herself, make sure to hit that subscribe button. There are many more tales of resilience and justice waiting to be told. End of story.